Welcome everybody. My name is Lauren Wallman and I want to welcome everybody to the ACRL Instruction Section Management and Leadership Committee's online discussion series. Today's topic is collective learning, developing an instruction community of practice. So a few quick logistical things and then we're going to get started. If you do have any technical issues during the discussion today, please use the chat box. My co-moderator, Matt Upson, and I will be monitoring that. So if you do have any technical issues, please post that in the chat box. And also, we will be doing a Q&A at the very end. So if you do have any questions, make note of them, and we will open that up after all the presenters have completed. So without further delay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, Matt and I are members of the Management and Leadership Committee. Matt is currently our vice chair and I am a member of the committee. Matt is at Oklahoma State University and I am at University of Cincinnati Blue Ash College. We are very fortunate to have 4 presenters with us today. I'm going to do a very quick introduction of each of them and then we're going to turn it over to the first presentation. First up, we will have Mary Beth McCartan from New York University and Nicole Brown from University of California, Berkeley. The second presentation today will be Amanda Peters and Doreen Bradley, both from the University of Michigan. So without further delay, I'd like to turn it over to Mary Beth and Nicole. And they're going to get us started.
Hey, hello, this is Nicole. I'm about to share my screen with you. Okay, so hello and welcome. Good morning or good afternoon, whatever it is for you. Thank you, Lauren and Matt, for organizing this. I will introduce myself first. I'm Nicole Brown. I'm the head of the Instruction Services Division at the University of California, Berkeley. And I'm here with my colleague, Mary Beth. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Mary Beth McCartan. I'm an undergraduate instruction librarian at NYU Libraries.
Okay, and today we're going to tell you a story and share our lessons learned in our effort to create a community of practice for instruction librarians that fit our context, culture, and environment. And this is adapted from an interactive workshop that Mary Beth and I conducted at LOEX last spring. At the time, we both worked at NYU Libraries together in the Instructional Services Department, okay? So that'll help you understand our context. Oops. Okay, so to kick off the workshop, we started with a reflection, and we're not going to ask you to think, pair, share right now, but the prompt is useful because it can help reveal information about your context. So I'll read it and give you a moment to capture it. Think of a colleague or group of colleagues you learn from. What do they do to contribute to your learning? Provide as much detail as you can. I'll let you either type that in the chat box or just jot it down in a notebook. Capture it in any way that makes sense for you. Okay. So when we did this exercise at NYU, here's what we came up with. It revealed that there were a lot of people who teach within NYU Libraries, from our colleagues in instruction services, to reference associates and subject specialists, to archivists and our colleagues in the digital scholarship and data services units. And they all bring unique perspectives to teaching and learning. Like a garden, every community is different. And for us, we had over 80 people in this landscape. I'm going to turn it to Mary Beth now to describe how we cultivated it.
So the 80 people from the different areas that Nicole just mentioned all have a hand in instruction. So potentially there was a lot of instructional knowledge and expertise that could be shared among us if we had created the conditions. But actually back then, we didn't really have a means in place or really even a disposition at that time to reach across departmental lines in order to share notes about teaching approaches and strategies. And it wasn't like, one day we just suddenly woke up and realized that we should be working together more, and that to do that, of course, we should create a community of practice around instruction. The community of practice idea actually developed over time from work we were doing within our strategic plan. Goal 2 that you see here was titled The Teaching Role. And within that goal, Nicole and I were charged with leading an initiative. And this was the charge of the initiative: broaden the range and reach of professional development programs in methods and technologies for teaching. So in order to do this, we pulled together a team with representatives from all the areas of the libraries where teaching happens. In other words, the ones we mentioned before: instructional services, special collections, data services, and all the others. The initiative had a specific mandate to create and deliver workshops, discussions, classroom observations, team teaching, peer development, and other programs to those who teach across NYU libraries. So our initiative team started by doing lots of reading, reflecting, brainstorming. We thought a lot about our past approaches to professional development for teaching, and we were paying attention to what seemed to work and what really didn't work. And this is where the community of practice seed began to germinate.
And as Mary Beth mentioned, we did a lot of reading, and in our readings, we came across this really helpful definition for a community of practice: groups of people informally bound together by shared expertise and passion for a joint enterprise. And at its core, a community of practice is a person-to-person knowledge management strategy. It's about sharing, learning, and changing together. And it's about solving problems and developing and transferring best practices. And the underlying assumption is that learning is inherently social. And this is a concept that we're going to come back to in a bit.
So to get our heads around what a community of practice really means and sort of to internalize that, we found this comparison chart really helpful. So this compares a community of practice with other types of groups, like a formal working group, project team, informal network. So the chart shows that the main aspects that distinguish a community of practice are, basically 2 things. 1, that members self-select, and 2, that the approach to learning and development is to focus on problems directly related to members' day-to-day work. So now it was time to figure out how to get this community of practice thing off the ground, and how are we going to make it happen? The question became, how are we actually going to do this? How will we ever get there?
And for how will we get there, travel provided a really helpful metaphor. And let me give you an example of an exercise that we used with our team to think about outcomes for a community of practice, which is really to say, how are we going to get there? So we asked our group to imagine that we were going to Italy for vacation. And I'll invite you to do the same, okay? So the question is, how will you know that we've arrived? Go ahead and type it into the chat box or jot it down in a notebook. How will you know you've arrived in Italy? Okay, so for us, our group mentions things like the signs will be in Italian. There will be gelato everywhere. The architecture will be a giveaway. We could go on, and you may have written things like this or thought about these things. The idea here is that travel provided a metaphor that gave us a tangible way to talk about outcomes. This is Deb Gilchrist's assessment cycle, probably familiar to many of you, and it starts with outcomes, asking ourselves, what is it we want to achieve as a result of our work? Where do we want to go? Like Italy, right? Next, we identify criteria. How will we know we've met our outcomes? How will we know we're in Italy? So it's that you can see how using that metaphor is a nice hook into talking about concrete outcomes. After this, the cycle moves to assessment, where we can ask what kind of data we need to gather to know if we're being successful. Then we can analyze that data and implement changes, and that cycle begins again. So literally doing that exercise helped our group get their heads around what we were trying to do.
So when the initiative team did that going to Italy exercise with the assessment cycle, it was for the purpose of coming up with some criteria that would indicate that we had arrived at our destination, which was a thriving community of practice. And so the criteria that we came up with included things like brown bag lunches, discussion groups, coffee hours, workshops, and also more opportunities for team teaching. So, again, at this point, we took a look at what we were setting ourselves up to do. And once again, we thought, how are we really going to make this happen?
You can see the familiar arc here. So we came to the conclusion that we needed to harness social learning. So we kind of went back to that definition of communities of practice. And we decided that it meant putting into action the belief that we learn from each other. So we know from our professional practice that professional learning and development involves a lot more than just cognition. It involves making our tacit knowledge visible, sharing practices that work, and paying special attention to the affective and emotional sides of learning. The assumption is that learning is inherently social, yet we often work in isolation as we try to grow our teaching practice. So introducing innovation into our teaching can be scary, and a supportive community can make all the difference. So the idea that learning is socially situated is based on the work of anthropologists Jean Lave and Etienne Wenger, who've written extensively on this concept. And so let's connect this theory to practice. The literature offers really three broad sweeping sort of tips on implementing social learning. And the first is identifying the people with the interest, ability, and passion. Who is the community? Next, it's providing infrastructure. So this means resources and coordination. And the third big tip is assess it by capturing, collecting, and sharing stories. And this is how you know it's working. I'm going to give another metaphor here that was helpful for us. And I'd like you to think about this garden. Take a look. We're in spring. Here we're firmly in spring in California. Things are blooming. So imagine you need to take care of this garden. What are some things that would need to thrive? You can go ahead and jot those down in the chat box or in a notebook. Okay, great. So you might be thinking sunshine, water, weeding, nutrients, really good soil. We could go on. Like this, communities of practice require cultivation to succeed. I wish I could take credit for coming up with this metaphor because I love it, but I have to attribute it to Etienne Wenger, who coined the term and said, and I'll quote, "Like gardens, communities of practice respond to attention that respects their nature. You can't tug on a cornstalk to make it grow faster or taller, and you shouldn't yank a marigold out of the ground to see if it has roots. You can, however, till the soil, pull out weeds, and water during dry spells, and ensure that your plants have the proper nutrients." This cultivation metaphor helped us identify context-specific solutions for us to cultivate our community.
So one of the context-specific things to think about is, what does your community look like? In other words, who are your partners with the interest, ability, and passion? At NYU, these were our partners. And, for you, it's important to think about who your partners are in your particular setting.
Okay. So once we identified our partners, we began holding content-driven events that range from working with our Center for Teaching and our instructional technologists from across campus. And a lot of this content was really interesting and exciting, and it generated some enthusiasm. But we realized that building a community of practice is not just about the content. Remember, learning is social, and our teaching often happens in isolation. So this was an aha moment for us. And we realized that to really build community, we needed informal social interactions. For us, that meant cheese and wine. We began holding instruction soirees. We called them instruction soirees every semester. They were very light on content, and they were intentionally meant to get people in a space where they could get to know each other and build trust.
So these are the types of things that made sense in our social context. Then, again, your social context may be very different. It might for you be something more like an afternoon tea or a breakfast. So, again, important to think about that. Okay, so the third piece of putting social learning to work is the social activities aspect. In our instruction soirees and other events, we use different kinds of icebreaker type activities. We played games like People Bingo, in which we tailored the clues to our local community. We did Two Truths and a Lie. These are things you can look up on the internet and find how to play. We did Cards Against Librarianship, in which we made a safe for work version, again, that was kind of locally sourced. For one of our events, we even invited a trainer from the Upright Citizens Brigade to lead us through an improv workshop. And that was really valuable. From that, we walked away with some shared practices for, as they say, embracing yes and staying in the moment and rolling with whatever comes. And as we know, all these things are, really come in handy in the classroom. So these, again, are some of the social activities that we used at NYU and that seemed to work for us. You need to think about activities that might work with your particular community. So in closing, we invite you to think about how you can put social learning to work in your instruction program. And as we get to the question and answer and in your chat or whatever, we look forward to hearing your ideas for laying the groundwork for community of practice.
Thank you. And this is, again, who we are, our business cards. And then I'm just going to put up very quickly the references so that you have those, and these will be made available as part of the recording. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Lauren to transition to the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole and Mary Beth. We really appreciate you all spending time with us today. For everybody else, I know we've had a couple of questions regarding taking notes and if a recording will be available. And yes, ACRL will be providing a recording of this event, and we're also going to check in with the presenters regarding their slides to see if that's something that we can make available to everybody. So we're hoping that will be helpful. So without further delay, and so that we can keep on our schedule, I'd like to introduce our second presentation, and this is Amanda Peters and Doreen Bradley from the University of Michigan.
Hi, thank you, Lauren. This is Doreen and Amanda. We're just going to share our slides. And we're actually both in the same room at the same computer, so we may chime in on each other's parts of the presentation as well. Okay, so again, I'm Doreen Bradley and Amanda Peters is here, and we'll introduce kind of what we do in just a moment, but we're here to talk about our program at the University of Michigan called Instructor College, and we're going to talk about creating and sustaining a strong community of practice. Instructor College here has been around for 18 years now, so there's been lots of changes over those years. So I'm the Director of Learning Programs and Initiatives. Amanda and I are in the same unit here in the library, which is the Learning and Teaching Division.
And I'm Amanda Peters. I'm the Student Engagement Librarian here.
And as I mentioned, our program has been around for 18 years, which is a fairly long time. So I'm going to talk about the creation of the program and kind of the early years and how it changed and got to be established. And then Amanda's going to discuss Instructor College kind of as it is currently. And we both have had various roles in Instructor College, from being on its steering committee to participating in sessions and also leading sessions for it. So what is Instructor College? This is our kind of our mission statement, and we'll let you read it. But it's specifically our own in-house staff development effort to help all of us become better instructors. And you can see in the last line there, really focusing on realizing the full value of the library and all of the resources that it provides is our goal in providing instruction and in providing good instruction. So this is what we said 18 years ago, and I think it still, for the most part, holds true for us. To give you everyone a little bit of context about our institution, we're a very large decentralized system, like many of you as well. And here's a kind of a snapshot of our 2017 statistics. So we teach almost 1,300 instruction sessions to over 30,000 people a year. At any given time, we have 90 to 100 instructors in the library, all teaching. We have a publishing division that teaches, a copyright division, so we're teaching all kinds of things. Some instructors teach once a term or maybe even once a year, and then there are other people who teach 25 times a semester or maybe even more, maybe even 30 times a semester. So we have a really, really wide variety of professional development needs in this area. So you ask, why an instructor college? It sounds quite formal. And in the early years, so back in the late 1990s, like 1999, 1998, there was really an increasing emphasis on the instructional role of librarians across our campus. We were getting asked to teach a lot, and people who hadn't been asked to be part of formal curriculums before. So our library instructors, as with many of you, have come with perhaps little formal teacher training. And we found that that was the case with many of our instructors. We were getting asked to provide a service that we really had little experience with, but it was something that we knew that we really needed to identify as a priority. So our library leadership actually identified this as a priority for the whole library. And it came from the former director of our medical library, who really said that we need a teacher's college. That's what we need to do. We need to train ourselves and our colleagues to be good at this service that our institution needs us to provide. So the language came from teacher's college to actually be instructor's college. And it was definitely a top-down approach in our case. But because it was a top-down approach, we really think that there was significant support from library administration and really all parts of the library. So for us, it worked well at the beginning to have that top-down approach instead of a grassroots approach. Folks at all levels of the library really perceived the importance because it was a top-down approach and really made time to be part of it. Supervisors really encouraged their librarians to join Instructor College, and I'll talk a minute about what we mean by join. And it really created a lot of buy-in that some of our other grassroots probably efforts have lacked in prior years. So we had a planning task force launch in 1999, and then an official steering committee was appointed, and we began the Instructor College back in 2000. So our original formal structure was exactly that. It was quite formal. We had a foundation series that we decided, which were 4 different topics that all instructors needed to have sound skills in. And so though you can see what those were: orientation, putting together a session, how to work effectively with faculty, and actually marketing the service more. And then there were some theme sessions that were optional to attend. And those were more kind of pick and choose where you wanted to really concentrate additional time and effort, whether it was assessment or presentation skills. So while the top 4 in the foundations were required, the theme sessions were optional, but you did have to attend all the foundation ones and a couple theme ones, and then we awarded people a certificate of completion like they had gone through the Instructor's College. And at this time, since it was early and we were really trying, a lot of the staff here did not have the expertise necessarily that we were looking for. We had a real focus on getting well-known speakers from across campus, people who had won teaching awards and things like that, reaching out to our Center on Learning and Teaching to get folks to come in to talk about assessment and presentation. And also a few folks within our library to share their expertise. We identified those people who we thought were really, really good instructors and who we could all learn from. But emphasis was definitely on getting outside expertise and bringing that into the library so that we could really enrich our own internal expertise. So that was our original structure. And this existed for several years. We had annual elections for the steering committee, and it was, and people I think really look forward to being on the steering committee and helping shape this new effort library-wide. We had annual registration to be in the Instructor College, and we had two different levels. You could be a contributing member where you contribute your own expertise and help design sessions and lead sessions, or you could be a general member and just attend sessions. We were well funded from our library system and still are to have annual events and guest speakers and things like that. Back in the early 2000s, we actually had an office space with a book collection, workspace, equipment where you could really record yourself practice teaching and view that back. We don't have that space anymore though. We also had a brochure that we would give to new library instructors at the point of hire by our Library Human Resources. And this brochure really went over the Instructor College, what its goals were, how you could be part of it. So this formal process and arrangement lasted for, I'd say, a good number of years. And then we started to emphasize other parts of instruction. We realized that we had a really, I think, done a good job of getting people up to speed on teaching and covering all the basics. And people had our level of instruction expertise grew tremendously. So then we were starting to branch out more and looking at other topics that instructors were interested in, such as doing a lot more with assessment and mentoring, working with faculty in different ways than we had in the past. So it became much less formal. We started to survey library instructors each year to kind of get an idea of what areas they wanted to learn about and grow in for the coming year. And one more slide to kind of give you an idea about the formalness of it. This was our brochure when we started Instructor College for the first probably 5 or 7 years that we had it, talking about our resource center, what a community of learning it was, and the curriculum that we intended for instructors to go through. So that's kind of the background on Instructor College and how it got started. And I'll turn it over to Amanda now to talk about where we are today.
Yeah, so we still have a steering committee, but it's not by election anymore. It's by appointment. Often people might show an interest in wanting to be on the committee. We try to still make it representative of people throughout our library system. But we have regular meetings. I'm actually on the steering committee right now, and plan events for throughout the year. I want to say we have moved a little farther away from having outside speakers because we really have gotten to a point for probably a variety of reasons, but one being that we've had this Instructors College in place for so long that our speakers are often more internal, and we learn a lot from each other throughout the year. So a lot of our events are now internal speakers. But we do still, from time to time, I want to say, still, happens maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, that we have invited speakers come in from other institutions or throughout campus. A couple of our annual events that still provide a little bit of structure to the program so people know what to expect is a new instructor breakfast that we do once a year for anyone who's new. And this works well at our institution because we are so large. We actually generally have a pretty good amount of people who are at that. And so that's a kind of a nice way to get to know people. And then the other thing we always do is an end of year event. And the end of year event usually serves a few different purposes. We always do it sort of at the end of spring semester. So it's a little bit of a celebration and a pat on the back for everyone that we got through the year in instruction and the busyness of that. And it's a moment to sort of breathe and reflect on what we've accomplished. But often it's also used as an information sharing event where maybe a few people are chosen to speak at the event that represent new trends in instruction that have been seen, people who tried out new things, and so they get a moment to speak about those things. We also often use the end of year event as the place to gather some on-the-spot feedback from folks. We'll put note cards or a form on tables for people to fill out and talk about something that they really liked from the past year that they attended that was an Instructor College session, something they'd like to see us do in the future. And that's worked out really well as well. For more information about Instructor College, we do have an Instructor College website and a research guide. And so you can see additional information there. All right. So next up, I just thought we would give you a nice some examples of recent programs we've offered. I actually just realized the image on the previous slide was supposed to be on this slide about our fake news course. So I'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, a number of things that we've offered just recently in the past year or two. Peer observation. We've tried to do this in a number of different ways over the years, but we actually did a little bit more of a structured peer observation system this past year that we called Observe Across the Library. And we actually did a speed dating, quote unquote, event where people sort of matched themselves up to try to identify people that they would want to observe. We gave some structure to this even in saying, try to find one person in the room who's a new instructor that you might want to observe. Try to find somebody who's a very experienced instructor. Try to find someone who's in a unit totally different from yours. So gave some guidance in that way. And then just throughout the year, we gave people sort of a little bit of, sharing is paused. Okay. So we gave a few different incentives for people to observe each other. Don't forget to fill out the form after you've observed each other, and then you would be entered into a drawing to win prizes. And so we sort of kept up the interest that way. Sizzles and Fizzles, that was kind of a fun event that we did. People really enjoyed talking about their fizzles, of all things. That's something that we've discussed maybe doing again in the future. It was a nice moment for some people just to share something that maybe fizzled at first, but then they sort of, learned the lessons themselves and worked their way through it. Or in some cases, people would bring things that they were struggling with for feedback from other people in the audience about how they'd worked their way through different issues. The fizzle that I shared had to do with teaching lessons around academic integrity and how tricky that can be. So really, really great session. We've, of course, done sessions around the framework for information literacy. And this past year, a couple of new sessions that we tried out. We teach a number of credit-bearing courses. And so all of the different librarians who teach in that capacity talked about their experiences, everything from teaching a 3-credit course to a 1-credit mini course. So that was really great. And then the multi-section session, that had to do with sometimes here at U of M we get request where it's like 10 sections of the same course. And so there's one librarian who's sort of coordinating all of that, but then what are some of the difficulties and logistics and planning that happen while you're trying to get other librarians to help out with that kind of situation. So that was an interesting session. And finally, one of the most successful sessions we had this year was fake news being the big it topic of the day. We have offered a mini course around that topic. So the librarians who planned that course and taught that course talked about their experiences. And it was really fascinating to see how the students especially have really taken a lot of interest in this and how it's helped us have a moment to talk about evaluation of sources in a different way. Okay, so a question that we get asked a lot is, well, how do you get buy-in and gain participation? It's really difficult for people to make time for these kinds of things. But as Doreen mentioned, the initial top-down approach really helped us get this off the ground in an official way that we think really helped create a community. And over time, if librarians didn't already perceive that they had a need to strengthen their instructional practices, that due to a lot of these sessions, they sort of figured this piece out and started attending more of these sessions. So that was great. We try to have a wide variety of programs throughout the year that appeal to librarians across our system. As Doreen mentioned, we have some people that teach a lot, some people that teach a little, some people that only teach graduate students, others that only teach undergrads, and everything in between. So we really try to make sure we're being inclusive and try to represent different kinds of instructional practices that might be happening throughout our library system. And then again, just trying to get feedback from everyone. That end of year survey for suggested sessions has been really useful. So we have a few quotes actually to share about our impact on the impact that we think Instructor College has had on our library. This is based on an outcome-based evaluation of Instructor College that was done by some graduate students at our School of Information a few years ago. And they actually interviewed and surveyed some of our librarians. And so these are all librarian quotes about their Instructor College experiences. So I have a few slides that have to do with impact. This first one, all of the quotes are thematic around the idea of sharing. And so I really liked that first quote where people were talking about, someone was talking about feeling burned out. And so getting that new enthusiasm from people is really helpful. But also just the idea of a structured opportunity in that last quote on the page to get together and talk is probably what a lot of us would say is one of the main really great things about Instructor College. The second page has to do with the confidence that people felt that they gained from participating in Instructor College. It's again this affirmation that we're all doing sort of similar types of activities, that we're on the right track because other colleagues are doing similar types of activities in their classes, but also just developing confidence in doing instruction, again, because a lot of us are not trained to be teachers, but throughout attending these sessions that we all gain a good amount of confidence. And then finally, in terms of skill gains, going to some sessions that are a little bit outside of our comfort zone. For example, this first quote is about someone who primarily worked with undergrad or graduate students, so understanding a little bit more about how to teach to undergrads was interesting to them. This second quote has to do with a particular program we offered in Instructor College for a few years that was called Lesson Study, that was really about taking a deep dive into some of the concepts that we were teaching, and as a group trying to develop lessons around those concepts. So this person just felt that was really helpful. It was something that, the practicing in front of peers and getting feedback, because we would develop the lessons and then actually find student populations to sort of do test sessions with and get feedback from them. And so this person found that that was really, really helpful in becoming a better teacher. In terms of sustainability and future plans, we feel like, 18 years, we've done pretty well with the sustainability piece. So that is, feels really good that we have been able to keep this going. It's always a challenge for people to find the time to attend sessions. And we've learned to be happy if, we have 10 people come to an event. But we also just are always trying to be mindful of the fact that it is difficult to fit these things in. So we'll plan more sessions where we know there's an instruction lull at the end of the semester, or brown bag sessions where people can fit it in over lunch. So those have been some of our strategies. So what does an ideal community practice look like? Pretty simple, really, learning from each other, actually making that room and time for discussion and sharing, helping people connect across the library, but also helping them connect with the larger university community or even other institutions. So those are really, really important pieces of a community practice. We know that we are a little unusual in our size. We know that some of you listening might be similar sized institutions, but we know a lot of you are also coming from institutions where you might have a much smaller pool of librarians to pull into a community of practice. And so one thing I would leave you with is, if you don't feel that you have a large enough community of practice at your own institution, we have here at University of Michigan developed a statewide group as well to talk about instruction. It's called the Michigan Instruction Exchange, and one of our librarians here was really, involved in reaching out to people across our state and talking with other college librarians about their instructional activities. And so once a year, we have a conference to talk about our instruction in this statewide group. And that's been a really great opportunity to talk with people close by, similar kinds of needs, but a little bit of a larger group of people to draw from for new ideas. So that might be something that might be more of a possibility for you rather than an institution that has 150 librarians. So wanted to throw that out there as well. So that is.
So we'll stop sharing our slides and turn it back over so we can start discussion.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Matt Upson. I'm at Oklahoma State University, and we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. I have a few to get us started, but if you want to go ahead and just enter your question into the chat box, we'll kind of work through those. To kick off, for Amanda and Doreen, we had a question during your presentation just about some of the phrasing you used. You referred to a mini course, and the question was, is a mini course several meetings with students in a specific class? Could you define that for us?
Sure. Yeah. Apologies for that. We, get into this university language, but it's a 1 credit course. The reason it's considered a mini course is often they're only offered for half the semester, so for 7 weeks. And it is several meetings with the same students, so a little bit more of a chance to get in depth with them about a particular information literacy topics.
Okay, thanks. And really, I think this one can be applied to both sets of presenters, and maybe we'll start with Mary Beth and Nicole. But how did your instructors and librarians react to the in-classroom observations? I know sometimes people don't, they think they're doing a great job. They don't think there's necessarily anything to learn. Maybe they just don't feel comfortable being observed. Did you have any of that type of reaction, and how were you able to address concerns?
Yeah, this is Amanda, and I would just say that Ours is totally voluntary. There are a lot of messages that include phrases like, this is not something that is tied to your promotion or anything like that, so we really try to make it, very clear that this is just something that you can do for your own personal improvement.
Right, and this is Doreen, and we keep an instruction calendar where everybody can see like all the sessions that are going on every day, every week, every month, and so people can view that and see what's coming up that they might want to go and observe, but they absolutely have to check with the librarian who's teaching that session to see if it's even okay for them to come. So it's totally voluntary.
Okay, thanks. Mary Beth and Nicole, how about you?
Well, Matt, for us, we really didn't have observation as part of what we've done so far. I mean, certainly people informally set up observations with each other, but it's not one of the things that we have yet really pushed a great deal. I think what we've done more so is the team teaching aspect, and that does give you an opportunity to see how another person teaches and, to sort of influence each other. So it's a similar outcome, I suppose.
Yeah, I would definitely add that is something we've done here at University of Michigan as well, as team teaching, and that is a fantastic lower stakes kind of way to see each other teach, and for it to not feel as judgy.
Yeah, and to help train new instructors as well.
And this is Nicole, and I'd like to just reiterate what Amanda and Doreen said, and what Mary Beth showed on the comparison snapshot of different types of groups, and just remembering that a community of practice, the core thing is that it's voluntary. So although we didn't have that observation piece, we did find a little group. Our department actually was willing to try lesson study, so we did that on a smaller scale. So these things, again, it's like your context is going to inform what you can do.
Okay, and then for our Michigan folks, are your grad assistant instructors required to participate in the Instructor College?
I guess I would have to ask what you mean by that. For graduate student instructors across the university, I guess they're not related to what we do.
No, we don't have any like library students in the library who teach. So I don't know if that's what the question is, but we, our instructors within the library are pretty much just our librarians and any of our professional staff who teach as well. But we don't have any students who teach. Regular student instructors from across the university would go through our Center for Research on Learning and Teaching to learn how to teach.
Okay. Yeah, my take on that was if there are any grad students who are providing instruction in your library.
Yeah, no, we don't have any. On occasion, we'll get a request for an internship, and we pair that person with an experienced librarian, and they may end up leading part of a session, but probably not a whole session if they're just with us maybe for 40 weeks or a certain amount of a practicum.
Okay. Okay, I think this one is really applicable to everyone. We had a question from someone who's an equity librarian, and they're starting a community of practice focusing on equity and information literacy. They're at a community college, very overworked, no budget, fewer resources. Any tips on how to get the momentum going?
I mean, I guess I would just say baby steps. Try to get everybody together over lunch, have everybody maybe either do a potluck, or B, just have everybody bring their own lunches and maybe have a few cookies sitting out or whatever, and try to take even a half hour to say what's going on with you and with instruction, and just keep it really broad. I guess I don't have anything. I know it's tough when you're at a smaller place and you don't have a lot of resources.
Right, or picking maybe one or two things that everyone would like to improve on, or picking 2 articles that you're going to read over the course of the semester and just come together to talk about those. We've tried reading clubs. We have a big emphasis on inclusive teaching practices, so maybe finding something that's new, that's from outside the library literature that you can bring into your teaching as well.
Okay, Mary Beth and Nicole, anything to add?
This is Nicole. I mean, I will also add, so I think that sounds amazing, first of all. I guess part of the message in our, well, what we learned was to be nice to ourselves, to know that not everything's going to work, and to like really step back and do that opening reflection piece of who are my co-learners. Maybe it's beyond the library. Maybe there's a really great partner on your campus. And I'm especially sensitive to this because I started a new job in August. So I'm learning a whole new context now. And it's very interesting to understand how much context affects what you want to do and what you can do and what's going to work. So be nice to yourself. That's my advice.
Okay, and we have a question about the impetus for the programs, and I think maybe you've mentioned this in part during the presentations, but really, what was the driving factor behind these programs? I know Michigan, in your case, it's been around a long time, and maybe that's lost to history. But what kind of kick-started these efforts?
This is Mary Beth, and you know, again, for us, it had to do with the initiative that Nicole and I were working on for our strategic plan, which was really, you know, a very clear, you know, mandate to, you know, tap into all those who teach throughout the libraries and, you know, make use of that collective expertise and wisdom by not necessarily creating a community of practice. That wasn't the initial idea, but that's kind of what we came to after we thought about, we've done professional development things before, you know, not that they were all that effective. What might we do differently this time? And we did a lot of reading about the community of practice and, you know, started to go in that direction, and the idea of social learning and how important that is, and how important it is for people just to know each other and to build trust with each other. So, you know, there was always the sense that there's a lot of people here with a lot of things that they could be sharing, and, you know, that will make us all better. But the impetus, you know, actually was, we didn't see an opportunity necessarily before our strategic plan, and then there it was, and it gave us a push, you know, a jump start.
And this is Doreen at Michigan, and we kind of gave some background on the impetus for Instructor College starting, but it was really campus demand and need for the library to come and teach for them. And many of our librarians saying, you know, I was hired to select materials, curate collections, and help people with reference and research, but I don't know anything about teaching. So it was really to support them in providing the service that campus needed us to provide.
Okay, great, thank you. Question about team teaching. In clarification, I think when you refer to team teaching, you're talking about 2 library instructors working together as opposed to a library instructor and maybe an outside faculty member. Is that the case? Or if not, are there opportunities as part of the programs to bring in some faculty members and kind of work with them in this team teaching approach?
Yeah, here at Michigan, when we refer to team teaching, we're talking about 2 librarians. I will say that many of our librarians do work in collaboration with faculty on the sessions, but it's usually not to the point where they get up and physically teach together.
And at NYU, yeah, we were mostly talking about librarians working together, either, you know, within the same department to, you know, just reinforce the lesson and to learn from each other, or very often across departments, an undergraduate instruction librarian with a special collection librarian, where that applied for a certain class that we were doing. So we were talking about things like that, a little bit outside of, librarian to librarian, in that we would sometimes team up with people in our expository writing program to do some kind of interjecting information literacy into one of the sessions that they were doing about writing.
Okay. And then a question about, did the programs play any role, or were they driven by any effort to kind of standardize instruction, kind of create a uniform approach, or were they really just born out of that, attempt to take librarians who maybe had no experience teaching and make them into better instructors?
I was going to say, here at Michigan, it was totally to improve instruction. We really don't try and standardize the way anyone teaches, because, that creative part of teaching is, I think, what makes people really good at it, and doing what works for them. And we also recognize that each of our librarians, subject specialists, or our technology instructors as well, they know their clientele and who they're teaching for and what works. So we want them to do what they think is best.
Yeah, even when we would develop those lesson plans together, it was fully recognized and understood that everybody would put their own spin on them, right, and teach in their own way.
Yeah, and this is Mary Beth. I would just echo the same. We felt the same way at NYU, just really giving people the opportunity to make it their own.
Okay, we'll wrap up with these last two questions in the chat. Just a request for potential follow-up emails with the presenters, if that would be okay. Checking with our presenters, maybe even routing them to Lauren or myself as moderators, and we could forward them on if needed. But presenters, is that okay with you if anyone wants to approach you via email with any questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then our final question, which I think you touched on, is just asking about ways to tap ideas or tap colleagues for ideas about coverage and meetings, what kind of topics. What are a couple of effective ways to come up with good topics for these sessions?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have an end of year event, and we usually take that as a physical moment to sort of have people maybe at small groups, brainstorm ideas that they would like to see happen. And then somebody takes those notes and passes them in to the steering committee. And then we recognize that maybe not everybody's at that event. And so we also put out a survey asking folks for ideas. And so that is definitely usually a jump start for the coming year and what we're going to cover.
And because Instructor College has been around so long here at Michigan, it really has its own brand, and people automatically think, they see something that interests them and they say, oh, Instructor College should offer that. We hear that all the time. People just automatically think of Instructor College when they see something that they think that the rest of their colleagues could benefit from. So that brand recognition goes a really long way for us in helping funnel suggestions to us.
We also did a survey at NYU as part of our initial getting started, and that it offered us quick win opportunities. So we found people wanted more about discussion-based teaching, and so we were able to do a quick turnaround and develop a program. So to show people that we were listening and that we were responding to the needs. So I think the survey and asking people can go really far for this kind of thing.
Okay, great. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you everyone for your time this afternoon, for attending. Thank you to our presenters, Mary Beth, Nicole, Amanda, and Doreen. Thank you to Lauren for managing a lot of the logistics for this, and to Sophie Skinner and Elois Sharp with ACRL and managing this transition to Zoom. Much appreciated. Again, we will get the link out to various listservs, and we've also got your emails as you logged into Zoom, so we can follow up with the recording of the session, and we'll see about getting the slide decks for everyone. So please let us know if you have any other questions after this. Thank you again, and have a great day.